Babysitters of Reddit. What seemingly normal parent has dark secrets? My name's Ryan from Askreddit Tells, and today we're going to be looking at that. But before we do, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to help keep this channel moving forward. I nannied for this very rich family with 3 kids from the West Coast who would come to South Florida for summer vacations every year. The mother was in her 30s, clearly had her kids when she was young, and was very stereotypically hot. Blonde, thin, big boobs, perfect teeth. Her husband was a little older, salt and pepper, super handsome, very George Clooney-esque. Their kids were all blonde-haired, blue-eyed, cute as F. They absolutely adored their parents. Dad would help the kids and Mom settle into the house and then fly back to Cali for work. Babysat 3 to 5 times a week, 6:30 p.m. to 2 a.m. Mom would get all dolled up, leave her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, and come home very late, clearly drunk, and sometimes brought men home with her that she introduced as her friends. She would often overpay me, which I never complained about, but I worried for the kids. A significant amount of couples having this arrangement. Not saying they do, but you'd be surprised what people do with their marriage. My daddy hits my mommy sometimes. For that when I was still in high school, I told my mom what she said, and my mom went to the police station to report it. I like it when you're here, not the other lady. She's mean and she makes me sit in the closet. This little girl was referring to her dad's girlfriend. I told the dad about it and never saw the girlfriend around again. And for some comic relief, my older brother and I play swords in the bathroom. Daddy taught us how. Asked him how to show me with his action figures what he meant, expecting the worst, and he says, "Look," and goes into his dad's closet and pulls out giant foam swords. Thankfully, not all in the same house. Somewhat wholesome story. I used to babysit for the kids down the street when I was in high school. One night I went into the parents' bedroom to get something, I think a puzzle, and there was a book on the nightstand called How to Comfort Your Kids When You're Thinking of Divorce, or something like that. The next time I was over, there was a book downstairs on the mom's desk. That was The Couple's Therapist Guide to Saving a Failing Relationship. It made me sad because the parents seemed really happy together whenever I saw them. I felt bad that they must have been going through a hard time behind the scenes. My parents had a pretty unhappy marriage, so I tried to be extra nice to the kids. I hope they hadn't listened to their parents fighting. Anyway, this went on for a few months with no further indications of trouble. I felt like I knew this awful secret that the kids didn't know. One night I came over to babysit. The mom was in grad school and she had class, and the same books were sitting on the counter. As the mom was leaving, she was like, "Oh, I can't forget the textbooks," and grabbed them off the counter. I actually didn't know what she was studying, so I asked what class she had. Turns out she was studying to be a couples and family therapist. The books I saw were her school books. In retrospect, that made me complete sense because the titles were kind of academic, but I immediately assumed that they were divorcing. About a decade later, they are still married, and the wife is a very successful couples therapy and family therapist. Go figure. I used to babysit for my next-door neighbor who had an 8-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. I was 13 when I started babysitting for them, and I knew off the bat that the kids were an interesting duo, to say the least, and I have too many stories to tell from when I was watching them. We all went to school together, so when we got off the bus, we'd walk to their apartment and I'd watch them, make sure they got their homework done, and make them the snack of the day. One day we had a half day at school, and I think the mom forgot, because when we walked into the apartment, I heard one of the doors shut. At the time, we thought it was an intruder, so I grabbed the 5-year-old's baseball bat and told them to stay in the room, and I'd do some investigating. I opened the bathroom door, and there was the mom, half naked, with a guy that wasn't her husband. She gave me all the money in her wallet and her business card, she was a photographer, and told me to never speak of it again. I caught her cheating and made out with $400 and a $650 photo shoot package. Took pictures for all the upcoming holidays so I could keep giving gifts to my family. I babysat them for about 3 months after before they moved away. And remember folks, you heard it on the internet, so it has to be true. This reminds me of a weird babysitting job that I had once, also in the 70s. I got a call from a woman who said that she got my number from a friend. She couldn't remember who though. She sent a taxi to pick me up, and I still remember feeling kind of freaked out. Like this was very sketchy. The taxi pulled up to a very old apartment building. For some reason, it totally reminded me of the building from Rosemary's Baby. There were 2 women there. The place was just one giant room with a kitchen and a bathroom off it. The lights were dim and the room seemed to be full of beds, but the beds were on angles or pushed together, and there were tons of bedding and clothes all over the place. Whoever I spoke to on the phone told me that there was one 7-year-old boy, but I could clearly see that there were at least 5 kids aged about a year up to maybe 5. No boy who looked anything close to 7, and all of the kids had longish hair and looked really neglected. The women didn't say much, except that they'd be back around 11. It was only 6 in the evening, and all the kids were asleep and stayed asleep, except for one toddler who woke up kind of whining, crying for a minute or 2. I couldn't really tell how many kids were there. There was no food in the fridge, no milk, no nothing. Nothing in the cupboards, there was no TV, which was a real hardship for me. There was only one book. I think it was called Every Woman's Handbook. And it was basically a feminist book about women's bodies. I sat there and read it since there was nothing else to do. After an hour or so, I could hear the noise in the kitchen. It literally sounded like a man making demon noises, even though it was the kitchen sink drain. Totally scared the crap out of me. 13-year-old me was certain that these women hired me to stay there and they had someone trying to scare me. This was Victoria, because during a time when everyone was talking about the Satanic Church, a big thing, and I was sure that these women and the demonic sink talker were Satanists and that I was going to get murdered that night. Oh, and did I mention that they didn't have a phone? The women came back promptly at 11. They paid me a little bit more than what they said they would, which was fair since there was more kids than what I was told. Although it was a very freaky night, I was blown away by the fact that the kids were asleep and stayed asleep. Did they drug them? They sent me home in a cab and I was scared for weeks that they were going to show up and kidnap me or ask me to babysit again. And I was never able to find out how they got my number. I used to babysit when I was around 13 to 14-ish. My neighbors and 3 kids, ages 4, 7, and 11. The house was really nice, always clean and tidy. One time they asked me to babysit for a couple hours. Okay, no big deal. They paid me $6 an hour. When I got there, they made the kids shake my hand and say thank you for babysitting us. I thought it was weird, but it was whatever. The parents left and the kids wanted those dinosaur chicken nuggets, so I made them some. As they were eating, the 7-year-old asked for a toy. She said it was in her parents' dresser. I didn't want to snoop around, but if she wanted the toy, I get it for her. I went into the parents' room and found the dresser. I opened the first one and all I see are stacks of cash. Okay, weird, but not my business. I went back out to ask the girl what the dresser drawer it was in. She goes over and literally points at the second drawer and says, "Oh, don't open that one. It has bags of sugar in it." That's what I hear mommy say. I was like, oh, okay then. She grabs her toy from the 4th drawer and runs off. I did take a peek in the drawer and sure enough, under the socks were bags of cocaine. I was shocked, but I didn't say anything. I put everything back where it was and left the room. When the parents got back, I took the cash and left. Never babysat there again. Too long didn't read, babysat some kids and found cocaine in the parents' drawer. I'm not sure if this counts, but this is a secret between myself and my nephew. My sister was 23/24 and she was going through her divorce. She and her 3-year-old son came to live with us. I was in high school at the time and devoted all of my after-school time to him. He and I were close. We were so close, I would be on the couch with him in my lap at 3 a.m., watching In the Night Garden for the billionth time. Still in my school uniform, but now smelling of regurgitated milk and doing my math homework with my left arm. Meanwhile, my sister would be out partying and whatnot. One day, it was just my nephew and I. At this time, he was, I think, around 4. I was in my school uniform, getting ready to leave for school. He was helping me get ready by putting his favorite toys in my bag. After I was heading out, I told him that I loved him like usual, and he replied, "I love you too, Mummy." I was stunned, but I was already running late, so I brushed it off and went to school. I tried to encourage him to call me auntie again, but when others were around he did, and when we were alone he looked at me with his sweet little eyes and called me mommy. He eventually says, "I wish you were my real mommy." Tantrums become more common for him. He throws them when his mom is around and begins to avoid her hugs. Her hugs were only there to pose for selfies and show off what a good parent she is. She would start crying and screaming and get sent to his room for misbehaving. My mom, Nanny, and my sister would go out and leave me in charge. I would then go to my nephew and give him a big old bear hug. I'm not the parent and he isn't my child, but our secret was mutual. I wished that he were my child and he wished I was his mom. We had to keep our wishes secret because if my sister knew that I was ruining her image by taking all of the mother-son love, then hell would have broken loose. She was all about self-image to the point she became a compulsive liar and also had some other mental problems. His teachers noticed our bond, and when he entered primary school, his after-school babysitters knew about his other mom. My nephew is 10 now. I don't know if he remembers any of this, but the other day was my birthday, and for the very first time, he tried to earn money through chores to buy me a gift himself. It was a Squirtle amiibo. Too long didn't read? My baby nephew and I developed a secret mother-son bond that only teachers and babysitters picked up on, and it had to be a secret because his real mom was crazy. When I was 13 to 14-ish, I used to babysit 2 kids while their parents went to Amway functions. One night, for whatever reason, I looked behind the couch and saw a bunch of magazines. I collected them thinking they'd been dropped behind there by accident by the kids I babysat. It was a huge stash of Penthouse and Playboy magazines, and I had to quickly re-hide them before the kids saw them. I was curious naturally, but I told the mom when she drove me home. I don't recall if she said anything or not, but I stopped babysitting her kids shortly after that because I moved away. I babysat 3 young boys during my senior year of high school. Their parents were separated and having marriage issues, but went on weekly date nights to work on their marriage, as well as attend counseling. What I didn't know was the husband was abusing the wife. One day, she filed a restraining order against him, and this made him go into a rage. He broke into her apartment and killed her, and then killed himself, all while the boys were home. They were able to escape out the garage. I was babysitting at my neighbor's house. They were a young couple, early 30s, with 2 kids aged 5 and 8. I was 16 at the time, and the first question they asked me is if I had a boyfriend, and if I was a virgin, because they didn't want me seeing boys while babysitting. I think part of the reason why they asked this is because they were pretty wild themselves and probably did crazy stuff when they were younger and babysitting. When they found out I smoked, they always left some cigarettes for me. They always told me that they'd be home around 12 or 1, but most of the times I would fall asleep and they would stumble home completely drunk around 3 in the night. They'd give me way too much money as an excuse, which I obviously didn't mind. After a while, the dad started messaging me online, first just asking innocent questions, but after a while they became more sexual in nature. I told him I didn't feel comfortable with that, so he stopped. They broke up a little while later because the mom started throwing wild parties at their home. I randomly walked by there with a friend of mine once and she invited us in and gave us a beer. Me and my friends felt pretty cool, but here we were at a grown-up party having beers, until the mom came up to us to offer some cocaine. We were shocked and declined and left the party quickly after that. I told my parents a couple of years later about all this, after the mom and kids moved, and they were outraged. Apparently, they always acted like they were very respectable. Well, that about does it for today's video. If you liked it, make sure to check out some of our other stuff and maybe even subscribe. As always, my name's Ryan from Askreddit Tells, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.